Welcome once again to the High Performance Human Podcast. It's your man Andy here, and I am delighted to be joined by a human who I've admired from afar. We connected relatively recently, actually, and broke bread a little bit at an airport whilst waiting for a flight, and instantly became very, very good friends, as was declared by the person herself. Hayley Van De Ven is the director of REMAX up in Queensland. She is an award-winning, multi-award-winning real estate professional and business owner. She is a mum, she is a speaker, she is an inspiration to a whole bunch of people. And aside from that, she's a bloody good yarn as well. Hayley, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the High Performance Human Podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. And it was really awesome to connect at the Rise conference and then just kismet wise get stuck at the airport waiting for our flights. So it was really, really nice to get to know you a little bit better. And thanks for having me on today.
Oh, look, pleasure's all mine, Hayley. I've been wanting to get you on for a little bit because I've had all sorts of amazing people come onto the podcast. One of the main reasons that I really wanted to get you on um, is not so much for your business acumen, which is clearly evident, right? It's the unapologetic way in which you tend to go about everything. And I say that in the best way possible because for a lot of people, they will try and do this whole authentic thing and balls it up royally because they try too hard. You do it effortlessly. And it's one of the biggest things that I've always respected, I've always admired for you, even like I said, from a distance. And so I'm really, really keen to dig into how you manage to do it without seemingly, I mean, I'm pretty sure you probably would put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, but you just seem to do it effortlessly, which is so incredible.
Thank you. I think. Look, to be honest, the reality is like I'm a country girl, right? So I grew up in a small town in New Zealand, and my parents are farmers, and they had trucking companies, and they've always been self-employed. But in Australia, they would call them battlers. In New Zealand, we just call them people. Um, and like for me, I guess that's kind of what I know. You work really hard for what you want. And I know that there's lots of people out there that sing, the work hard, work smarter, not harder, and you don't want to work hard, you want to, but it's not something that I know any other way than, to kind of roll your sleeves up, being brought up as a Kiwi. But also just being a good human, like to me, I think it shouldn't be difficult for people to be authentic and to kind of show their true selves. They should just be able to be a good person. And I'm really guilty of, dropping the occasional, swear word in my excitement. And
Hmm.
I beat myself up about that sometimes as well. But I also think that it makes me human and it makes me normal. And, people at the end of the day, people attract people. And I think that by just being a good human, by just being myself, and hopefully people can see that for what it is rather than, being a part-time professional and a part-time human. It's like, well, you can be a good person and be really awesome as well, professionally.
We're going to dig into that. That's going to be a really, really good topic of conversation. You've given us a bit of a brief overview as to your background coming from New Zealand, but for those people that are listening that don't know exactly who Hayley Van De Ven is, just give us a bit of a rundown, give a bit of an elevator sort of Genesis story as to how you've got to this point.
Okay, so currently I am the director and sole business owner of REMAX Results in Morningside and Brisbane, for people that don't know Queensland, and also REMAX Bayside out on the eastern kind of Bayside, about 25 to 30 minutes from the city as well. So we have those three offices. I also am the founding the co-founder of VA for You, which now has three businesses in Bali, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines, and have recently sold my interest in REMAX Mackay. We had an incredible salesperson that was in that business that has successioned me out. So like I could smell that freedom a couple of months ago, which is great. But yeah, I mean, for me, I've always been in sales. I started when I was 17 at Ray White on reception, and had the best, what I would think, induction to real estate one could ever ask for. A really generous boss who gave me lots of chances and the opportunity to be a salesperson's PA, PM assistant, receptionist, and then obviously going into sales. So I moved into sales then like 6 months into my journey, had 12 years selling, went into corporate, sold franchises for 2 years before buying this first office in Morningside in 2016. We've built this business from a business of 4 to a business of 120. So, now I'm really proud to lead the Limitless Group. They're a really awesome bunch of people, and, what I would consider the dream team. So I've got to curate that over the last 8 years.
Try and unpack that in 5 seconds, gang. Try and unpack that. I'll tell you what. The first thing that's popped into my head that I need to ask before we crack on with the rest of the podcast is coming from and I say this in inverted commas, battler family, right?
Yeah.
And coming from that sort of stock to being the sole arbiter of a 120 person business plus a VA business as well, operates across 3 countries, and yet you refer to yourself still as a country girl. Like there's an obvious superficial disconnect between the two. Like a country girl should, stereotypically not end up being in this sort of position. What do you think it is? I mean, and you talked about your work ethic being one, but I think that's too basic an answer, to be honest. I don't think anybody's going to buy the fact that you just work hard, right? So what is it in your DNA, do you think, or in your upbringing that allowed you to have this expansive mindset?
So I think there's a few key things. I think my dad's a farmer. And as I mentioned to you, like that is a huge, like, testament to faith, right? And if you think about it, it's kind of like coincides like prospecting. Like for farmers, they sow their seeds, they do all the work during the year, and they have faith that the grass is going to grow and that, the cows are going to eat it and produce really good milk. Now, I know that that sounds super simple, but the reality is it's like trust the process, do the work, the results show up. So if we like really simplify that in everybody's day-to-day business, along the way, I've had to trust the process. I've had to seek really, really good advice. I spend a lot of time, money, and effort in professional and personal development. I understand that I am my own asset and that people within our business are the things that actually make us grow. So the things that I invest in personally are how to be a better leader and how to grow our people, and trust that the process that I have in place to grow these guys to all new heights works. So for me, I know that my jam is $300,000 plus writers, because I don't have to teach them how to sell real estate. I have to teach them how to grow their businesses, leverage themselves in a team, create sustainable life so that they're not going to burn out, like get hopped up on Mountain Dew and fizzle out, and that they're going to be able to like show the test of time. So for me, I know it sounds really, really simplistic, but really it's super, super simple. Trust the process. Like when you talk to me about, what in my upbringing, a great example is when I had the results business. We were already the number one REMAX business in Australia back in 2020. And then I decided to buy the REMAX Bayside business, which was 2 offices out on the Bayside. That was a huge chunk because I was buying like a rent roll of 600. I didn't have any debt on my results business. So, I was all of a sudden going into, some considerable debt as well. And as the sole business owner, I was thinking to myself, oh shit, I don't know if I can do this. My dad and said, Dad, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And he's a farmer, right? Like he's shrewd, he's Dutch. So,
Mm,
tight,
mm,
tight.
mm.
But in saying that, I said to him, Dad, I don't know if I should do this. Like this is a really big call. I've committed to it. And he said, Hayley, what's the worst that can happen? I said, well, the worst that can happen is that I lose everything. I said, well, what happens if you lose everything? I said, well, I'd have to go back to selling real estate. And he said, well, do you like selling real estate? I said, yeah, I fucking love it. And he's like, well, could that if you went back to selling real estate, would that put a roof over your head? And I was like, yeah, of course it can. It's like, so would you better survive if you sold real estate again? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I said, so what's the fucking problem?
Your old man sounds like a decent bloke.
But good point, right? Like if that's
Yeah.
the very worst thing that happens and the outcome is that I end up doing something I already love and, look, I don't know if I'd be much shot these days, but I'd back myself in, like to be able to have the ability to do that. Absolutely. And that was the important part. So understanding, everyone can see you in the mirror, by the way. I just said people walk into the office like creep, creep, creep. I'll just get something for you. But yeah, if that's the very worst thing that could happen, then that's a pretty good outcome, right? And it demystified the risk for me. So all of a sudden, I was like, yeah, okay, you're not wrong, Dad. If that's the worst thing that could happen, am I really happy with that outcome? And yes, I am. So I did it.
It's really interesting that you say that. I've been marinating on a conversation I had quite a few episodes ago with he's an ultra Australian rep marathon runner called Kay Bretts, and we were talking about how when a situation is thrust upon you, you have the reality and then your perception of the reality, right? And the trick and the challenge is to try and separate the two for long enough so that you can see the actual reality for what it is before you taint it with your own opinions and your concerns and your fears and all that sort of shit, right? And what your old man has done then effectively for you is he's been able to split the emotion from the reality quite abruptly, and giving you that relief to be able to see it for what it is, right? Which is really, really interesting. And I think a lot of the time, it does require us to have someone in our corner that can do that for us, that we have the trust. And you talk about faith, the faith in to be able to actually see it for the pragmatic reality that it actually is, right? We all need one of them.
Yeah. And just stripping back the onion. And I think, like as I mentioned, I've done a lot of work, like professional and personal development stuff, in my journey in the last 10 years in particular, like making the move from sales into business ownership and then removing myself from all of the sales compartment. So I'm not a selling principal.
Mm,
My role in the business is to look after the people, and to do all the strategic pieces.
mm,
So when I look at, that as my role, my biggest asset is me in the sense that I'm able to then help them, to kind of take their business to the next level. And our business's biggest asset is our people.
100%.
And it's
Now,
just simple.
before we go on, though, I've got to ask you the question I ask everybody, which is what your definition of a high performance human is. Now, I've got this belief, it's, success, connection, influence, and happiness, and it all works in an ecosystem. No one can survive without the other. What's your definition of a high performance human? You alluded to it earlier, I think, but give us a clear definition.
It's a really good question because I think people can, um, show high performance at different times in their lives at different levels.
Mm.
I think the ability to have limitless beliefs, and it sounds really,
Don't worry, we try and avoid a
yeah,
cliche here, but we
yeah,
can't we can't help
that's
it
the thing,
sometimes.
right? Like to have those limitless beliefs is really, really important. And I say that because being the limitless group, it's something that I say quite a lot. But understanding that, like most of the time, the thing that stands between us and what we would consider success is actually our belief system. And when you remove the lid off the jar or the limitless beliefs, that people have in place, like that's when you see the real high performance human, the person that's able to transcend, what people think is possible. and just smash through those glass ceilings.
Transcend what people think is possible. Hey, there's your clip there, social media team, right there.
Thank you.
So I love it. I love it. Now you've talked about belief system. You've mentioned the word faith on a number of occasions, trust in the process and whatnot. When has there been a time when that's either been tested severely or almost broken for you? Because that's where we stretch our boundaries, right? I dare say, without knowing your entire life, I dare say this hasn't been an entirely smooth rainbow-filled journey, right? As much as you can see her smiling, gang, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see the smile. For those of you listening on the podcast, Hayley exudes, positivity and happiness. She's just a top chick. But
I'm saying so many nice things. You're making me uncomfortable.
oh, don't worry. So Giz, when have you really struggled? When's that been severely tested?
So I kind of probably I assume that people know a lot of things, right, about me because I probably do, I think that I share the story quite often, but maybe I don't share it as much as I need to.
Mm.
There's probably three pivotal points in my business that were really tough. Back in 2017, when I was brand new to business ownership, I had a business partner who I had to eject from the business quite quickly. I had a really big lesson in learning what business ownership was all about, and certainly what partnerships were all about. So that was a big pivotal point for me. And then in 2019, when I just got clear of that, and you get clear of a business partner, you've lumped yourself with this responsibility and this debt and this fear. And then my mum got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
Mm.
So my mum, who was my rock and my best friend, was basically told that, you're stage 4, you've got lung cancer, you might have 9 months, you might have 2 years, but, there's really not much we can do. And I had a new baby by that time. I'd already had, I think Cooper was about 3 or something like that. And then I had a new baby. And what I didn't realize is I was also suffering really significant postnatal depression at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because one day, and I didn't even know I had postnatal depression. I just woke up one day and it was fine again. And I was like, oh, fuck, what was that? Turns out it was postnatal depression, but I had no idea because I had nobody around me to recognize that I was going through something and I wasn't my, normal happy-go-lucky self. But I also think there was, a fair bit of like masking that was going on at the time as well, because I was just putting on a brave face to show up every day for everybody else.
Now, did you looking back, did you find that you had actually maybe have gone through a little bit of that with the first one as well in hindsight?
No, first one, no problem.
Right.
Second one was in the trenches of business ownership.
Mm.
Had a brand new baby that was literally in the carrier next to my desk, sleeping, because when they're little, they're easy, right? They don't move, so they just
Exactly.
I was still at that point where I was building the property management business in our business at that time. And I was going out to do rental appraisals and taking the baby with me to appraisals. And I look at that now and think, oh my God, people must have thought that was so unprofessional. But they loved it. They used to pick the baby up and carry the tiny little Geordie around. He was so tiny. He was the first 6 weeks of his life. And I was like, okay, great. I'll just wander around and take some notes. And I was getting the business, and you think, how does that happen? You're sleep deprived, you've got postnatal depression, you're an absolute fucking wreck. I could only imagine what I looked like. And somehow where there's a will, there's a way. And because success was my only option, it just happened.
Yeah.
And we got through it. But when my mum got diagnosed with cancer, that totally rocked my world. I think she died in the end of 2019. So we're coming up to her 5-year anniversary next month. And it was the day before my dad's birthday. So
Mm,
very easy to remember.
mm,
But in saying that, yeah, like it totally just shifted my access. I just, at that point, I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, this
mm,
can't be, this can't be this can't be my lot.
mm,
So in the end of 2019, I kind of just spent that last quarter of the year just kind of grieving, feeling those feelings. Got an incredible psychologist that I started working with to work through the grief. She was also incredible in a high performance mentality piece as well.
mm.
And she'd worked with mothers and women and, leaders in business alike. So she was a great inspiration to me. But it was the start of 2020 that I connected with Sherry Storer and said to her, like probably in the lowest of my low, I really want to kick this up a notch, but I
Mm,
need help. I need somebody to give me that direction and that purpose.
mm.
And she was absolutely that person for me. She like picked me up and dusted me off. We laugh about her serving me that you need to stop thinking like a poor little Kiwi kid and get your shit on the road. She's like, I did not say that. I'm like, well, that's what I heard.
Mhm.
So, it was pivotal, but it really meant that I was able to kind of refocus, have somebody in my corner that would hold me up when I couldn't hold myself up.
Mm.
And start kicking some big goals in my business, but also in my personal life and, get my head right, get my business right, and, get my life back on track. And it's been a transforming last 4 years.
Firstly, thank you for sharing that. Because none of that shit's easy to talk about. It doesn't matter how long it's been. None of that's easy to talk about. And I've got a tremendously comparable story myself, but we will not go into that. I want to dig into a topic that is something that I feel society needs to really start to marinate on a little bit more. And I think this would be a really good topic for me and you to have a bit of a yarn about. It's it's that fine line that we've not got right as a society between being able to define stress versus depression, right?
Yeah.
Because you would have, I mean, you would continue to go, you working with, you've got 120 people under you. There will be stresses, micro stresses every day, right? Um, and yet when you talked about your biggest challenges and you brought up that whole topic of depression, and yet you were still able to put the mask on, rock and roll, do your thing, keep the business growing and evolving and what have you, right? Because clearly the business didn't falter because you stayed in growth mode like the entire time by the sounds of it, give or
we
take.
kind of we kind of plateaued in that
Yeah, but you didn't go back.
2020 because I was almost not there. But the work that I'd put in prior to that was building a team that held space for me when I wasn't there.
Mm,
So I know I've seen it in other businesses. As soon as the leader is not present, the team's gone.
mm,
Like you see it over and over again, and it's sad someone gets sick or they have some time off or they go through issues or whatever it may be, and they come back to like an empty shell.
mm,
For whatever reason, maybe I'd filled that cup enough while people, while I was there, that those guys waited
mm,
for me to come back because they knew that I would be back. And it was just lucky that I kind of came back with a vengeance.
mm. Now, this defining line, because stress, anxiety, all that sort of stuff, it's very prevalent. And I won't just limit this to real estate. It's prevalent in every industry right now, right? Especially every service industry. And we need to be able to define the two because, especially from a leadership point of view,
Mhm.
okay, but also from an individual point of view, because I think too many people right now are too quick to jump on. I've got a mental health issue. I've got depression. I've got this. I've got that. I've got the other.
Yeah.
When realistically, it's a storm in a teacup,
Yeah. It's a bad
essentially, right?
day.
It's a
And
bad day.
yeah. And
Now, how can we in society, in your opinion, Hayley, having gone through, depression and dealing with stress on a regular basis and whatnot, how can we as individuals monitor that? Because the one thing that we've got to be very careful of when we talk about this sort of stuff is that depression can creep up on you and bite in the arse real badly if you don't sort of keep an eye on it, right? So it is a tough line to be able to define. But what are the key things do you think that we can perhaps raise to the attention of people so that they can help to distinguish a bad day from a bad existence, essentially?
Yeah. Um, I mean, firstly, I'll be honest in saying I don't know that I'm qualified in answering this question. I know certainly going through like the whole postnatal, battle, I wasn't aware that I had it,
Mm,
and if I'm honest with you, I didn't have any red flags that made me think, because I was going through, this process with my mum, and her cancer battle. Like I just thought these were all normal emotions and they were part and parcel, and it was just,
yeah.
few for the course.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big thing for me was that I I feel like in our team, we see lots of high performers that ride the ups and downs
Mm-hmm.
of our industry. And I don't think it's unique to our industry. I believe what you're saying, the service industry, I think people's expectations are higher than they've ever been.
Uh-huh.
And I think when somebody's paying you $30,000 or $40,000 in a commission, their expectation is even higher once again. And our job, I believe, as business owners and as leaders of our businesses, team leaders as well, because obviously within our business we have high performance salespeople that manage a team of, lead agents and sales associates and listing agents, buy managers, all with those same sets of stresses.
Mm.
And I think certainly in our business, when I identify that somebody's going through a really, really tough time, it is about having a conversation. It's about being connected to your business and connected to your people so you can grab that stuff and jump on it quickly when
Mm.
it, don't let it become a bad life. When I say it's a bad day, not a bad life, that's nice. I'm cleaning my windows up here. We've got lots of activity here at Morningside today. Um, but the truth is, right, that it is often just a bad day. It's not a bad life. Often it is, like an isolated issue. It doesn't have to turn into, depression. It doesn't have to spiral into something that's, devastating. And it also, often when it's perspective, like you were saying before, it's peeling back the onion. But it's also staying in your lane. It's not getting involved in everybody's shit.
Oh,
Like I just often I want to say to people, not your monkeys, not your circus, mate. Like this is not your job.
say that phrase again, please, for the people in the back.
Which one?
The monkey one.
Oh, not your monkeys, not your circus. 100%. Like, I'd probably say that once or twice a week at least. Our senior leadership team all have their own business units within the business, and they're kind of my direct reports.
Mm.
And often, with property management in particular, it's like this needs to be a conversation about what their role is and what their responsibilities are and who they're, answering to.
Mm.
Not about all the other things because that's not their problem.
You could argue that that's probably one of the most significant issues in society across the board,
Correct.
right?
I agree.
When you consider the amount of macro concerns that are going on in the world that are getting so much oxygen, right? And look, we're not belittling or making them any less significant in terms of world events or what have you. But sometimes, right, I think it's fair for us to say that the world would be a much better place if we swept our own doorstep. It'd be a much better place if instead of jumping on a bandwagon because you have got a bit of a lack of identity within yourself for whatever reason, because let's face it, life is so loud these days, and you can get caught up in it all. But to go banging on about a cause that if you're being honest with yourself, know very little about, but you're doing it just because then you feel like you've got an identity. I think we all need to just stop and reset and actually sort of work out our own identity to a degree. And you can tie that to a micro sense in terms of business. What's your identity within the business? Or if you are someone that is finding yourself gravitating towards macro causes and whatnot, and it's no problem in being passionate about stuff. But ultimately, we as individuals cannot change the world in one go, but we can certainly change our world and what goes on in our own ecosystem. We're too busy looking outside of us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, too
That-
busy, like comparing yourself to the competitor, too busy, like measuring yourself up a lot of the
Mhm.
time when, the competition is not, it's certainly not inside the walls of your office.
Mm.
And yes, absolutely, the competition, is the next person that you're going up against at a listing presentation. But really, the competition that we should be driving is just us being 1% better every day. I know I stole that from LSKD, but the reality is it resonates with me. It's like, well, how can today be better than yesterday? What
Yeah.
can we do today that makes us better than we were last week?
Mm.
And like, what can we implement? Not just talk about, but actually implement in our businesses that makes a tangible difference.
Talk is so cheap, and what I'm really picking up from what you're putting down there is, and it is, I think it is coming back to your country girl mentality, is the practicality of whether something's going to work or whether it's not going to work. You don't see farmers pontificating on a whiteboard, do you? You see them cracking on and getting
They
stuck
just
in.
get like one of our business values, like we've got, like our limitless values, right? And one of them is get shit done. Like it's literally one of our, our business values that we live or die by is literally just get in there and get shit done.
What
You
are the others?
Um, so we've got, I wish I had it in front of me now because now I'm gonna like, I'm on the spot. I'm like freaking out. Get shit done's my favorite one. But it's what we do. So we expect to win. We expect to achieve. So it's what we do. So we
Mhm.
win, we impress, we exceed expectations. We influence people's property dreams. We're, like I'm panicking. Another one that is really, really massive for us is that we're economically minded. So we make good commercial decisions and we're commercially minded in the way that we roll out our business. So, sometimes, it's better to walk away than take the business at any cost, things like that.
Mm.
From a brand identity perspective, super, super important as well. We go above the rest. So, going above the crowd is massive for us and finding those little 1% opportunities. Also, we lift the lid off the jar. Have you ever heard that story about the flea that jumps out of the jar?
Conditioning.
Yeah, and for us, that's really big. So it's something that we live or die by as well, making sure that the lid is always off the jar and that we provide those experiences to our customers. Being client centric and customer centric is especially important to us as well. Providing those great experiences for people, so that they do create raving fans in our business. So yeah, I probably missed out a couple, but
Well,
for us, it's the stuff that we, like that's our North Star, that's our guiding light. And, ultimately to sum it up, it's like, if you're going to talk a big game, you got to walk a big game, right?
the practicality that you just spoke with, but at the same time, apart from get shit done, all of the other ones lent into this whole thing of having faith in the greater picture. It's being able to walk away from business, which short term might fill your boots, but long term won't fill your life, right? That sort of thought process for me is a really critical one for high performing humans because it's very, very easy to take what's right in front of you, but when what is right in front of you diverts you away from your purpose, your reason for being, it's only going to take you on a detour that might give you short-term happiness, but it's going to give you long-term misery. And I love that all of those ones, apart from the get shit done, which I think is super practical, and I love that one. All the other ones were just so so much more aligned with that whole have faith in who you are, what you're about, why you're about, and where you want to head to. And that's so critical. I love that. I really, really like that actually. Um,
And the authenticity piece, like, one of the others is be authentic and, be a good human, right?
mm,
So having that authentic and abundant mindset is really important for us to build out the world's best team. And that's always been, something that, is another one of our values around being the world's best team. That's really easy to deliver in lip service, but it's hard to hold the line as a leader and sometimes make a big, call. Um, like I've had to, you know, stick to my guns a couple of times. And again, you've got to, like, if you talk a big game, you've got to be able to walk a big game, right? So, where we met at the Rise conference, something that has been really important to me was having that environment where people felt safe and they felt heard and they felt, psychologically, they were in a really, really good space.
mm,
And sometimes that can be tough because you've got to stamp out stuff that, status quo would be far easier to just turn a blind eye to.
mm.
But in those types of moments, I think that's what shows the consistency of showing up every day. And it also creates a culture where people know that shit's not going to be, like it's not going to roll. So it just doesn't happen.
What I really, really like, and I'm conscious that you got to head off, but what I'm really conscious that you've stepped upon there is the difference between being a nice person and a good human. A nice person eases and appeases for short-term happiness.
Yeah.
A good human is the one that's prepared to draw a line in the sand when something isn't right. I love that. I love that. And I wish we could. In fact, we're going to have to get you back on because, team, the reason why we're bringing this thing to a head, because I'm sure that you're all listening to this going, no, I want to listen to a lot more. And so do I. But a couple of technical issues prevented us from having a tremendously long chat. But so I'm going to have you on. We're going to call that. I'm gonna call on that one and say, right, you owe me 20 minutes because I need to talk to you for a lot longer.
Yeah, sorry,
Um,
that was totally my fault. Um, I was ready to throw my computer
yes, yes,
against the wall.
it was a rather testing start technologically speaking. But anyway, but Hayley, look, I could talk to you for hours. I really could, in all seriousness. You're an absolute superstar, and I love everything about how you go about it and who you are and what you are. So, one last thing though that I always ask in at the end of these episodes is in your pursuit. So we're all chasing for whatever reason, we're all chasing another version of high performance, right? And I'm sure, as you've mentioned there, personal development's massive for you and it continues to be. But right now, as you look at your own game,
Mhm.
what is the one thing that you feel you need most of right now? What's the one thing that you need to work on the most that you think is like perhaps needs to get better?
I need to work on making space for creativity. So,
Ooh.
something that is really pertinent to me is I'm the sole report for 50 plus salespeople. So,
Hmm.
although a lot of our salespeople, the majority of them are businesses within our business, so they all run their own businesses. So varying, they need like different lots of me. Some, I speak to every day. Some I see on a weekly basis. Some a monthly basis. Some a quarterly basis. Some we have, a mid-year business meeting and an end-of-year business meeting, and we just casually catch up in the hallways. But for me, having that level of contact with our team sometimes doesn't leave me with a lot of personal kind of creativity space.
Right.
It's something that I really, really want to work on. I think I squeeze in all the strategic stuff, but I would love to, I'd love to have a day a week that's dedicated to the creative,
Mm,
where I can really kind of double down and create some awesome things in our business. I mean, we've got a very clear strategic plan, but the question that I ask myself is, if this is good, what does great look like? And what time do I need to like make that happen?
I really like that. Need space for creative. We all need that shit. To be fair, we all need that. But yeah, and you can't force that either. That's one of them things that, you talked about squeezing in strategic planning. You can't squeeze in creativity. It just happens, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it happens when you are in a space where you can relax and you can lean into the creative and
Mm,
you can, really create exactly what you're wanting. And without getting too airy fairy about it, like, you can really dig deep into, what you do want the business to look like in its best version of itself. And
Mm.
sure, you can have a vision for what you want, but, like, what's better than that? And that takes time, and it also takes space where you're not pressured to be out the door at 12 o'clock. You're not, like, I've got an hour to be creative. That's not how it works.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so that's something that I really want to work on in the next year is, potentially in my head, and I don't even know if this will work, but Fridays being my day to, like, okay, this is when I can lean into my creative. This is when I can make space to, maybe start a little bit later, be non-contact for a few hours where I'm uninterrupted. But what happens, right, before I do that, I need to build a team that doesn't need me on Fridays.
Mm. Yeah.
And, I also need to have those points of contact to, fix problems, troubleshoot solutions, when I'm not there, because otherwise that Friday doesn't happen.
Hayley Van De Ven, I can't thank you enough for your time with us. I've got to get you back on because I could listen to you for hours. You're a gem of a human. You're a brilliant operator. Of that, there is no doubt. And you have tremendous faith in where you're heading, which I think is something that we can all learn from. Thank you so much on behalf of the listeners. I'm sure, guys, you will have plenty of notes, but you might have a few questions after this as well. I know that I've got some. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to send us a DM or put a comment on somewhere, or you can email us, andy@andyreid.com.au. Connect with Hayley as well. I highly recommend you do that because even if all you do is follow her, you will be inspired in some way, shape, or form to improve your game. So, Hayley, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry about the interruptions and
Oh, don't you
the
worry.
window cleaning and oh gosh,
Hey, look, it's called life,
and
though.
life.
It's called life. It's called life. That's what we're about here on the High Performance Human Podcast team. On behalf of Hayley and myself, thank you so much for joining us yet again. We can't thank you enough for all of your support. And please make sure if you found this useful, share it around, please. Make sure you share it around and give it a subscribe. And even better, if you give us a review, we'd really appreciate that as well. Until next time, though, team, and I will let you all know when I'm going to get Hayley back on because she is coming back on. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, happy, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again on the next episode. Take care, team.
Thanks, guys.